Okay, I am ready now to pin up the final part of the hem, and I need my seam gauge again, and I need my pins. This time I'm going to set my seam gauge to 1 inch. Okay, so 1 inch, that's going to be the big first, it's usually a cut in the metal that's right at the inch marks. So at the first big cut in there, make sure it's right there. And again, make sure you get one that has a good slider that's going to stay in place. And because if this wiggles around, then your hem's going to be uneven. All right, so I pinned the edge of the hem up the first time, that 1/2 inch, and I put pins in, and I gave it a nice press so that I have a nice crisp edge here. And when I fold this up, I know where I need to tuck that under. If you didn't press it very well, take it back and press that edge again before you take the pins out. Otherwise, this is going to be wiggly and it's not going to look nice. So I always start at the seams, and I'm going to fold up, and as I fold up, I want to make sure that I am matching my seam line on the hem to the side seam. I also want to check to make sure that I've got my seam allowance going the right direction, and I pressed it that way the first time. This is one of those steps that whenever I fold up and do things like this, students often pin the opposite direction, and they just really don't understand. New people who sew don't really understand why it's important to put the pins in a certain way. First of all, it has to do with ergonomics. It is easier to pin in and out back towards you than it is to pin in and away from you. There's a totally different shoulder movement, and you're probably thinking, well, Miss Jones, what do I care about that? Well, if you sew a lot, number one, it's going to make your shoulder hurt eventually. And number two, if you were playing a sport, if you were learning any kind of skill, you would want to make sure that you were doing it the most efficient way. And so that's why I'm telling you, put it in and back towards you. All right? The other reason has to do with how it holds the fabric. So I'm going to go to the other one. And again, I'm going to fold it up that 1 inch, matching up my seam line. So I fold it up, and then I'm going to check, and it wasn't quite enough, so I'm going to move it up a little bit more. Now I got it right. Okay? So if I put my pin in near the edge and out again, I'm not sewing down here. I'm sewing up here. And this is where I want it to be held tightly so that as I stitch along here, it's not going to wiggle around. And the other thing is, if I fold this back like this, I haven't entirely caught this edge. Sometimes if this is only 1/4 inch, I haven't caught my little flappy thing at all, my little tuck under. And so that's going to wiggle around while I'm sewing, and I'm going to have a big mess. So the pins go in near the edge where you're going to sew and back towards you. All right, so I did the 2 ends first, or the 2 side seams first, side and inner leg, and then I'm going to, this is another one of those 2 ends first, middle, middle, middle thing. And that's because there may be a slight difference in this edge and the edge you're attaching it to. And that can happen because of the way you cut it, because of the way that you sew it, or if you kind of mishandled it while you were doing your pressing, you could actually have stretched part of this. And so we want to make sure that that's going to lay flat. So 2 ends first, middle, middle, middle. I'm going to measure again, put my pin in. When I do this, I probably want my pins about every 2 fingers apart, because I really don't want this stuff to shift around. And if you notice, I measure every time, even though I think it's probably about right. I measure every time. Okay, in the middle there, or about the middle. And then check and pin. I hate ripping. That's why I pin. I really hate ripping. So I know that if I have it pinned correctly, some jobs I don't do a lot of pins, some jobs I do a lot of pins. This is a job that I use a lot of pins because I don't want to have it come undone and then me have to redo it. Not fun to rip. All right, I'm going to finish this part right here, and then I don't have to press this before I go to the sewing machine. I can just have it all pinned up. But our next step is to go to the sewing machine and stitch around both legs. And when that part is done, then our shorts, our pants are finished. So the hems are the last thing that we have to do, other than when we completely finish, we're going to take them back to the ironing board, give them a nice overall press, make sure that they look professional, and then you're ready for me to do the final grading. Or if you're not making these with me, if you're just making them for fun, it's time for you to put them on and be proud of yourself because you did a good job. One more pin and we are ready for the machine. All right.